to Fishing the DMV with your hosts, Thomas Ahrens and Jared Mounts. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
State and noticed that they had fish science classes, and I was like, what's fish science? And went to meet with the advisor at the time, and he told me all about it, told me what I had to do to get a career in it. Sounded interested, started taking classes, and I was hooked ever since. And the first time you get out on a boat and you're like working with fish, doing the kind of work that we do, you'll find out real fast if you love it or not. If you like being covered in slime and touching hundreds of fish a day, that kind of thing, and I was all in. I mean, I was on a boat and that was happening. I was like, man, this is the job for me. Now, I don't do any of that now, but back then, that's what I was doing.
Now he holds his desk down.
Now I hold my desk down. But yeah, I went to state twice. I went to state for my undergrad and my graduate degree.
So you get to stay in the area then?
Yeah, I did. I actually got to work my master's project on the river that I grew up on. So
really?
Yeah.
That's
so
cool.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I enjoyed doing that.
How did you two lovebirds meet, and how did this relationship in the podcast thing get going?
He called us lovebirds. That's a bit much. That's a bit deep. So I'll talk about how the podcast started. Yeah, before we ever started this podcast today, we were talking about communication and state agencies struggling with getting the word out, and that was one of the things I noticed coming up through my career, is that we as an agency really kind of struggle with, communicating the research that we do, getting it in the hands of the public, and for the public to be able to digest that kind of stuff. And so I started looking around, and I was like, man, there's a lot of fishing podcasts out there in the fishing world. That's kind of how a lot of fishermen get their information, is through podcasts. things like Bass Talk Live, those kinds of podcasts. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do exactly what they're doing. I would like to do something that's science-based, that shares the information that we have, but also links it back to fishing. And so, that's really the genesis of the podcast. And so we started, what are we, almost in year 4?
Yeah.
We're almost in year 4. We do one a month, and we pick a topic that's something to do somewhere in North Carolina. Like we've done things on smallmouth fisheries and largemouth fisheries and invasive species and carp fishing and you name it. We've done different topics, and so it's actually gotten a really good following, and a lot of people seemingly like it. I mean, we got a booth here, and people come by and talk to us about the podcast and all that kind of stuff. So, and I knew if I was going to be talking about fishing, there was one person I needed to talk about fishing, and that's this guy.
So we were fishing one day.
We were fishing.
As a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Since, Corey grew up in the area that I currently live. So when he comes home and sees folks, he generally calls me and says, where are the fish? Can we go fishing? Or something along those lines. And we were talking about that, and, you say yourself, you've seen the reports that Virginia writes. The reports are great. They got a lot of information in them. But they're hard for just anybody to read and really get a grasp of what's going on. So there's kind of this gap between, a lot of our real technical terms and our technical analysis. It's great work, but it's easy to get lost in it.
Yeah, you got to have almost a translator's mindset of taking to be able to talk. So in my day job, I deal with developers all the time, software developers, and bless their little hearts, they're really good at their task, but sometimes you have to communicate to the business, okay, this is what he meant. And it's taking that really high-level thinking of reports and then explaining it or letting it be bite-sized to the general populace.
Right. So instead of, we could send our report to somebody and they can read it and may get some of it, may not get some of it. But the goal of this is kind of take some of those reports, boil them down into this is what it's saying, this is what it means to you as an angler, and this is kind of where, how it all applies to the big picture of things as far as your fishing, to at least maybe help you catch more fish, but at least help you understand the population of what's going on. But so Corey we were talking about it on the boat, and he told me his ideas, and I was like, well, if you need somebody to talk fishing, that, we're talking about the one skill that I actually have here, so.
It is true. I'm not sure you're skilled at anything else, but you're good at that.
Right.
Yeah.
So we talked about it. We sent it up the flagpole. We had a lot of meetings about it, and we were able to
convince them to do it.
We were able to convince folks that it was a good idea.
How fun was that?
As it turned out, it was a good idea.
Yeah,
so,
it was. I mean, it was a struggle. I mean, state agencies in general struggle with newer technology and change, and I mean that's just the nature of the business, and there's nothing wrong with it. But there's also liabilities and stuff when you're doing things like this that you have to be aware of, and so we had to jump through those hoops, but it's been pretty doggone successful, and I've been extremely pleased with the response. I mean, we get tons of anglers that email us really good questions and talk to us and meet us. I mean, we got people taking our pictures and, wanting to have pictures taken and get autographs, and I'm like, man, this ain't right. But, it is what it is, so it's really actually gotten popular.
It's really given us a great opportunity to build relationships with angling groups, angling just individuals that really, we wouldn't have been able to meet or get with any other way.
And one of the things I wanted to do through the podcast is that there's always this kind of dichotomy between the public and state agency biologists. People are like, oh, the government's doing this or the government's doing that. They're regulating this, they're regulating that. And what I really wanted to show people is that the biologists that are doing the work for you, the public, are just normal humans like everybody else. And so I want to humanize, the people that work for us and get our.
We're not normal, but the rest of our guys are.
The rest of them are, yeah. But and get them to have a relationship outside of that kind of separated relationship, so that they're talking to the district biologist one-on-one, and they can call them up and say, hey, I'm so and so and I fish this, and I don't understand what's going on. Can you explain it to me? And trying to break down some of those barriers and some of those walls. And I don't know that it's perfect. Well, it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect, but it has seemingly done some of that.
It's a start.
Yeah, it's a start.
It's a big start.
Yeah. And you asked where we met. We met back in school. I think we met in like 2001, something like that. He was finishing undergrad, and I was in grad school at NC State.
Wow.
And so we've known each other for going on 24 years.
Yeah.
Dude, that's crazy.
He had a little bit of hair, I had a little bit of hair, and then we didn't have any hair, and I don't know when that happened, but it was pretty quick after we met. So that might have been the problem.
No, but that's how you get that good chemistry that you need to actually have a show that becomes successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that people like. I mean, we've been told we're fairly easy to listen to. Well, everybody says Ben's easy to listen to. I think everybody's annoyed by me, but that's okay. It's
Everyone is annoyed by it.
That's fine. Yeah, that's true. I would agree.
That's 100%.
That's a 100%. But we try to keep it light. We try to keep it informative, but we also try to keep it light. So that people can kind of not overwhelm them. We can science nerd out every once in a while, but we try to not overwhelm them with all the science all at once. And we try to mix it up where some things are really science, heavy, and then we get into the fishing side and talk about fishing and, how what we just talked about over here is how this affects what you do in your boat or standing on the bank or whatever. This is what you need to be thinking about. We say, we have a couple of things on our podcast that we say all the time that are kind of just tongue-in-cheek. Fish need water.
They do.
Good start.
Fish need water, and you got to think like a fish. If you want to be a better fisherman, you got to think like a fish. Most of the time, when people are on the water, they don't tend to think that way. They tend to think, I don't know what they think, really, to be honest, but they're not thinking like what that fish is thinking. And so they're not as successful as they could be if they were thinking like a fish. And that's what we're trying to teach through the podcast is this is what the fish are doing at this time, and this is what they're trying to do and accomplish. And if you think like that, you'll be a better fisherman over a long period of time. So,
I mean, it's how I approach a day of fishing too.
Yeah.
Is I take what I know as a fish biologist and what I know from my fishing, and I try to relate the two to make sense to me. This is why these fish are doing this today, and this is or this is why this didn't work because I should have been here or there somewhere else. So.
Yeah.
It's what I do all the time, and when I talk to folks about it, that's what I like. Well, you got to think about it from this standpoint instead of saying, "Well, there's 14 boats over there. That's probably where I need to go." Now you're thinking like a fisherman, not like the fish.
When I look at Virginia, for example, because it's such a massive state, like how many regions do you have, and how do you break that work down? Is it just 3 dudes that have to cover the whole state? Like for people that aren't aware, how does that work?
Well, roughly, we've got the coast, the Piedmont, and the mountains.
Okay, so 3.
But within that, you could even divide those further if you really wanted to. But we have, nine districts that are separated across the state, and each district
there's 3 in each region.
Is probably about
10 to 13 counties.
Okay.
And it's 2 people. So it's a big, our biologists have a very daunting task.
Yeah.
And even our districts that don't have a lot of water still have a lot of water.
Yeah.
Some of them have more than others, but we have lots of streams, lots of water bodies. Everybody has a full plate. It's
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it just from a regional perspective, those coastal districts have really large riverine systems that they work in, tidal systems that they work in, sounds that they work in, and then you get, as you move kind of into the Piedmont of the state, you get into our larger reservoir systems. You get into these kind of foot-hilly type streams where it's not mountainous but rocky, and there's all kinds of work to be done there. And then when you get to the mountains, like you think it kind of gets more uniform, but it really doesn't. You get really large rivers, you get really small streams. I mean, you got brook trout in the high elevations that are in ditches, basically, if you really look at it. And so, I mean, I don't remember the last time we looked at brook trout, but there's hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of populations of brook trout in our mountains that we have to get to. And that's really about 6 biologists that cover that.
It's crazy because when I think Appalachia, I mean, like my mom's side of the family, she's West Virginia, bleeds it, born and bred. You think of just West Virginia's Appalachia, and that's completely factually inaccurate. You have Virginia, you have North Carolina, but
Yep.
I feel like based on the people I've talked to, this is kind of the mysterious part of Appalachia is when you get out of the Virginia area and down into the Carolinas. Like, people don't talk about the fishing opportunities as much nationally as they probably should.
Well, North Carolina's trout program is huge and tremendous. It's a $1.4 billion industry to our state alone, and we have I want to say 2,800 miles. I think that's right. I might have that number wrong.
You're in the
I'm
world.
in the ballpark. 2,800 miles of trout streams in North Carolina. And so when you think about that, and then you got all the reservoirs that are scattered throughout Appalachia too in our state that we deal with, and that's from smallmouth to largemouth to walleye to trout to you name it. I mean, we got muskies, we got all kinds of fish that we deal with. So
I think I want to make sure I didn't misremember Hallaker, who runs the Shenandoah Valley, and he does the muskie program there. Is it North Carolina that has a big muskie breeding population that you guys do, or is it South Carolina that does that?
No, I don't know that South Carolina have muskie at all. North Carolina, we basically, most of our muskie are stocked only.
Where do you get them from?
We get them from here and Virginia.
Okay, so you guys do have a stocking program. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. We have a stocking program. Sorry, I didn't understand what you're saying.
My bad.
Yeah, but it's we basically stock several places in the state, but the major focus is the French Broad River, which flows through Asheville, and we've been stocking that for 50 years. And now what we're trying to do is reestablish. It's only been able to be done through stocking because all the spawning habitat's been gone for years because of basically urbanization of the stream. And now we're getting the opportunity to buy wetlands off of the, and we're taking those wetlands that weren't functional and moving them back to where they are functional. And now we're hoping that muskie are going to start using that to spawn, and eventually, hopefully, we won't have to stock the French Broad River anymore. There'll be a self-sustaining population of muskie.
And you guys, and making sure I understand this, you guys do have a hatchery program that actually breeds them.
Yes.
How hard was that to get going? Because I know, talking from Hallaker, that they get a lot of their muskie, I think, from you guys now.
Maybe.
And if that's the case, which I hear they're a tough nut to crack, because we're experimenting with smallmouth stocking right now and fish hatchery.
Yeah,
and that's a nightmare.
That's a nightmare. Yeah,
anytime you take on a new fish, there's a huge learning curve on, well, what's the most efficient, what's the best way, there's twofold. There's one, how do we do it from a hatchery standpoint, and then on the what's the best way to stock them on the other side. We stock fry in some situations, we stock advanced fingerlings in some situations, and every system, every situation kind of dictates a different pattern. So it's a lot of trial and error.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Ben. It's just a ton of trial and error. I mean, I think we were the first state. We might not have been the first state, but we were the first state that figured out how to reproduce American shad in the hatchery system. And that ended up being quite difficult. But once we figured it out, we could raise the snot out of them. Seemingly, I mean, we could raise millions of them. And so it's just, you got to have good hatchery managers, and we do.
We have great hatchery managers.
We have great hatchery managers. We got to have good hatchery managers, and we do. But you gotta take. It takes time. I mean, we haven't figured out smallmouth either. I mean, that's a nut. But South Carolina grows them all the time.
It's South Carolina, Virginia, Maryland just shut down their program. I had them on to talk about that. I think Texas, but Texas doesn't count because they have all the money to do whatever they want. I have some people on my show like, well, why doesn't Maryland do what Texas does? Why doesn't Virginia? It's like, you don't. That's Disneyland. Everyone
we get the
wants
same thing in North Carolina. Don't worry. We know that. We've heard that song and dance here too. So
and that's the other thing too is like how long does it take for you guys to go, like, let's say Lake X needs this amount of resources and we need to start focusing more of our funding here? Is that a 6-month process, a year, 2 years? Like, how does that work?
It's usually 2 years out.
2 years, wow.
Yeah, it's usually, well, that's true of, I mean, unless you're going to, because almost every state works off the same grants that we do, unless you are going to basically abandon all the things you planned right, to put it over here. If you're planning to do this, it's a 2-year plan. I mean, it really is. But from start to finish, to get stuff on the ground, it's at a minimum a 2-year plan.
Especially if it's a significant project.
Yeah, small things, we can do those, pretty quick, no big deal. But yeah, that's my job. Is the plant and it's part of his too. But it's really my job is the planning and the grant writing and all that. That's what I do now. Is trying to make sure that I can get the funds available to our staff can do the work. So it's very boring.
It's people get to see how the sausages are made, and that's important. I was either blessed or damned with being on the board in Maryland for the fishing license increase in price that's going to be going into effect into 2025, I think. And one thing they were talking about there is like, okay, we had a spike in fishing license and enthusiasm after the COVID year, and it's going back down. In Virginia, I know talking to them, there's an issue with fishing license sales. I personally have had a hypothesis that's because of it being like California 2.0. You have all these people coming in that they don't have an outdoors culture. They don't have it in their blood. In North Carolina, what is the pulse check on that? Is it decreasing, increasing, staying the same, just the enthusiasm for the outdoors?
We saw the same pulse. Wouldn't you say, Ben? We saw the same pulse during COVID. Everybody went out and bought a boat like a bunch of morons. And I tell people all the time, 3-4 years after COVID, there's going to be a lot of used boats ready to be sold because people are going to be fed up with them sitting in their yard and they're not using them. But I don't know if that's happened or not. This is just my prophecy.
Yeah, well, it's a big bump, and but it's hard to know because
it's come back down, but I don't think it's dropping. It's kind of stable.
That's good.
We generally in our state, we're kind of stable. We are seeing a massive influx of people that are not native North Carolinians, whether it be from California or whether Ohio, Pennsylvania, those areas. We're seeing a ton of those folks. Some of them fish, some of them don't. And so what we're seeing is a lot of our waters getting more crowded. We have a lot more people on the water than we used to. Whether they just be boaters, they might not be fishermen, it might just be boaters. And so we're seeing a lot of that, and that's putting pressure on kind of the system as a whole. And learning to deal with that is new to us,
How has the rise, let's go first spicy topic, catch photo release. How has that arisen and affected kind of the viewpoints going forward with, you can now have tournaments anywhere. It could be a slot lake and you could technically have a tournament. Technically they're not breaking the rules. I don't personally have a problem with it, but then on the side note, you could generate more pressure on a fishery that otherwise didn't have much of it.
I would say he's going to send that my way every time.
He's the tournament guy.
I did my master's work on tournaments.
Oh.
So, it was a neat project for sure. So what I would say, and it is in North Carolina, but we still predominantly have traditional tournaments. Mm-hmm. Our culture hasn't fully made the shift yet.
Interesting.
What I would say is from a impact to the fishery, catch photo release is your least amount of footprint on the fishery because you're getting that fish back in the water as quick as possible, and you don't have those concerns like, well, fish care and how do I need to ice my water? Do I need to, put treatments in my water? Do I need to have an oxygenator? You just need to take a picture and put that joker back in the water. So your footprint, as far as your impact of your tournament or your trail on the fishery, is going to be minimized compared to a traditional tournament. Now, to me, it's your question about are they going to be all over? That's structured by the rules of the tournament, right? If you can at that point you can have things as wide as you want. You can be anywhere you want to on this Saturday or this month. That's how some of them are structured. Or you're confined to being on a particular water body. We have a lot of tournament pressure, especially, Lake Norman, some of the Piedmont lakes, Jordan Falls, Gaston.
Those two had a big uptick, I think 2 years ago when BPT came in there.
Oh, yeah.
Luckily on the coast, we have a lot of tournaments, and we probably will start having even more because the bass fishing is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so we're drawing more people are interested in coming, but in the rivers, access can be tough. That we're not necessarily seeing a lot of exploitation type problems like some other states are seeing.
Yeah.
So, but Norman, some of the places that have tournaments every day, more than one on the weekend, those tournaments are going to have more and more impacts. And so, we don't have any rules against it, but as you're structuring your tournament, it's probably something that folks are going to start considering more and more as we go into the future.
I need to know like a quick little snippet or abstract about your dissertation on tournament fishing that you did when you were getting your education.
Okay, so I looked at tournament mortality and displacement. The particular lake I worked on was on Lake Martin in Alabama. Heavy tournament pressure. The take-home message was that there's short-term stockpiling of fish after tournaments. Those tournaments were all released at the same site, and you within about 6 months they'd start to dissipate out. The other side of that is mortality in tournaments. Unfortunately, is a real thing, and it's directly related to water temperature. When the water's warm, whether you like it or not, a lot of fish suffer mortality as a result. When it's cooler, that pressure's alleviated considerably. But once your water temperature's in the, above about 74, 75, a lot of those fish are dying that are being held all day long. My work was one of the first pieces of work on tournaments that looked at Alabama bass, and those ratios are even worse for Alabama bass. Alabama bass just never calm down in a live well, and so they kind of seem to stress out a lot more.
Well, you said the key word, because that's a fun thing that everyone in Virginia is talking about, is the Alabama bass situation.
They're not a fun thing, but go ahead.
Yeah, I've beaten that horse 1,000 times to death here, talking about Philpott, Gaston, Kerr, or Bugs, depending on how you want to say it. Where is that in the issue list for your state?
Well, yeah, it's been a high issue, probably going on a decade. And actually they've been here longer than that, but it really has come to light over the last 10 years. It started back in the early 90s in a smaller lake in the Appalachians right along the Georgia border called Lake Chateau. That was when they first showed up in the state of North Carolina, and it's a lake that borders it's in both states basically. But the real movement started when they came to Lake Norman. Lake Norman is a reservoir. If you don't know where that's at, it's just north of Charlotte on I-77. It's the largest reservoir in our state. It's like 33,000 acres. And they showed up in the late 90s. And anglers loved them, thought they were great. There was just, because Norman was historically known as a poor bass fishery. It's a poor fishery, period, because it's lacking nutrients.
Yeah.
But these guys, Clearwater Lake, open water, loved it. They just loved it. And Alabama bass just spread like wildfire, pushed the largemouth out of their habitats, and they dominate the lake now. But they didn't stay there. Since that was like 98, 99 when we first saw them. So now we're talking 27. Man, that's hard to believe, isn't it? God, I'm getting old.
Getting old as you're talking.
I'm getting older by the minute. Over that period of time, we've seen a progression all throughout the Catawba chain, which is what Lake Norman is on. All the reservoirs in the western part of the state that border Tennessee, they all have Alabama bass now. They've moved up into the kind of that section that you just talked about, that northern tier along the Virginia border. They first started in Ballew's Lake, which is a tributary to the Dan River, which goes to Carr Lake. That's how they're in Carr. And then I'm pretty sure people moved them to Gaston.
Yeah.
And so they're in Gaston, they're in Roanoke Rapids, they're in the Roanoke River below Roanoke Rapids Lake. They're in the Tar River, which is the river just south of the Roanoke River in the coastal plain. And so we really only have a really small, tight area of the state, and it's kind of that central southeast corner of the state that does not have Alabama bass. Everywhere else does.
It seems, from the people that I've talked to, I had an individual on from Auburn University talk about it. John Odenkirk talked about it. Anecdotally,
We don't like him.
Not at all, right? I know.
Odenkirk.
He missed his calling as a...
goodbye. Here we go. No, we like John. We're just kidding.
He missed his calling as like a biker model for Harley Davidson. I tell him that all the time.
That's probably...
But
That's pretty accurate.
That's pretty accurate. That's pretty good, yeah.
But anecdotally, it seems like there's a weird situation where they don't like SAV. You don't see spots thriving in lakes with a lot of grass. Why, if that is true, and it hasn't been documented, I don't think specifically in a data survey, why would that be?
Yeah.
It depends on.
I'm gonna ponder that.
Yeah, I'm gonna run my mouth for a minute while Corey comes up with the right answer.
No. You'll probably get the right answer.
Because they're never pushed into Florida, which is weird.
Right, they're not in Florida, and the question is well, why? And I don't know that I can say that, but I can tell you what I know about spotted bass where they're found, both invasive and my time in Alabama, is if a lake has vegetation, they're generally not selecting for those habitats. They're selecting for water with a little more energy in it, water that's a little deeper. The lakes that have low energy are generally like Norman, where they don't have a lot. So you got two different types of lakes. You got a lake like Lake Norman, where it's clear, the bowl, essentially, with very little vegetation. They do exceedingly well in a situation like that.
That's usually their quickest takeover.
They also do
situation.
exceedingly well in run-of-the-river reservoirs, where there's a lot of kind of riverine habitat, Gaston, Roanoke Rapids Lake, the Catawba chain is like that, where there is vegetation, but it's off to the side. So the Alabama bass seem to select for those riverine habitats, the main channel habitats, and then the largemouth are basically
sectioned off.
Yeah, sectioned off in that vegetation. So
the only thing, it's a perfect answer. I think it's great. Good job, by the way. You didn't need my approval. The only thing I'd add to that is everybody says they won't do this, and they do it.
Yeah.
And so my take home to everybody is you don't want them. You think you do.
Yeah.
You think you do, but you don't. We had a guy yesterday was talking to us about somebody was telling them that they really wish we put them in Falls Lake, which is a reservoir here locally in the Raleigh area that does not have them. It's great largemouth bass fishery. It has pigs in the early spring. Big females in the early spring. I'm like, they just don't know what they're talking about. And I don't mean it ugly. Like, you don't want to catch 100 fish that weighs 2 pounds or less and give up those opportunities to catch those 5 to 8 pound fish. At least I don't. And we got enough of those opportunities now in North Carolina that we don't need to add any more.
Yeah. That's the other thing we say on the podcast is do not move fish. Because if you have fish, even if you don't think you have an Alabama bass and you turn loose some bass, if you misidentified one, well, you've introduced them. Also, it's illegal. So we talk about that some as well, is don't stock fish where you didn't get them from.
Would you consider that the biggest issue that you guys are dealing with, or what are some other issues that you feel like is really putting a lot of time and energy and resources into the department?
Well, A&S is a big issue for us. Whether it be something like Alabama A&S is aquatic nuisance species, whether it be something like Alabama bass or blue catfish, flathead catfish,
hydrilla,
zebra mussels.
Apple snails.
Yeah. Okay, you going? What are we doing here? But it just takes up a lot of time and effort for our biologists to track all that stuff down. And we're never out in front of it. We try to educate people, and that's as much out in front of it as we can be. But it shows up, and we got to go deal with it. Once it's shown up, cat's out of the bag, and there's really not a whole lot of getting that cat back in the bag on most species. Most species, once they're out, and they're done. They're there.
Unfortunately, what we spend most of our time doing is documenting and describing the changes that have occurred.
And that's what we've done with Alabama bass, is we've documented that there's this massive takeover of Alabama bass throughout the state of North Carolina. I literally stood in a meeting. It's well over a decade ago now, and it was a bunch of employees, and I said to them, and I was up on my soapbox, which I can do, Ben knows this, And I said, the face of black bass management in North Carolina is about to change. We are about to see landscape changes in black bass. And everybody's like, yeah, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And I'm not saying I'm the greatest prognosticator, but that's exactly what's happening. I mean, we're getting to a place where smallmouth in western North Carolina, 15, 20 years from now, short of some sort of stocking program that we can establish, will be gone.
Yeah, or and that, very restricted.
Very restricted, whether that's reservoir or riverine for that matter. Because, I mean, these boogers don't, I mean, you look at the Broad River that flows from, it's just west of Charlotte, flows out of our mountains into South Carolina. That was a smallmouth bass fishery. It's not anymore. It's Alabama bass. So that's one of the, so A&S is a huge thing. You know, loss of habitat is another one that we have to deal with quite a bit. Changing habitats. I mean, we got a ton of people moving to North Carolina. And it might be the number one thing is what do we do with all these folks and where they're going and what effect does that have on our landscape? And that in turn affects our fisheries in a lot of different ways. And so we're having to navigate that because it's happening so fast. And I mean, we've seen a massive increase of people in the last 5 years, and that's not going to change. I mean, it's coming.
Yeah, it's interesting because like those homeowner associations, those people that buy a place on a body of water, they have such an influence as, you know, a part of the constituent base of how you want things to look going forward. And I know Lake Anna, there was an issue there where they tried very hard to get water willow back. They get water willow back, and now they're like, well, we don't want it because it does this, this, and this. It's like, yeah, but you like wake boats, don't you? This helps keep and solidify the shoreline. It's frustrating because I do feel like, and this is you get people that live places like in a city and they want it to be like an Instagram place. And they don't understand, like, no, this is like nature. This is wild where you're buying a place, and it has to have certain things to keep it healthy, which is hard.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we run into that a lot, particularly with reservoirs, people living on lakes, that kind of stuff. Maybe, I mean, some of that's starting to happen in our coastal plain now, and it's definitely happening in our mountains for sure, where, you know, somebody, you know, they want it to look, in their words, they use the word clean, you know, like a reservoir to be clean, which means no vegetation, you know, clear water. And that's just not the natural environment. That's not the way the natural world works. You know, there's supposed to be vegetation there. It's not supposed to be clear in North Carolina. The water's not supposed to be clear. It's actually supposed to be muddy here. It's highly silted, you know, soil types that we have. So, you know, those things happen.
And SAV, that's a whole conversation we could talk about for 3 hours because...
more than that.
I mean, it's... And there's no right answer of, again, like with the hydrilla thing, it's like, if the only cure is to do chemotherapy and nuke the whole lake and kill everything, is that the best thing? But I've had people kind of like, well, what else is there? And like, yeah, that's a damn good point. There's nothing that can selectively get rid of the bad thing, so the only response is nuke the lake.
Well, different states do it differently. When you're speaking about hydrilla, you know, North Carolina has been... They've done it in different ways, and we're not actually not the agency responsible for hydrilla. It's a different state agency altogether. But you know, some of it has been the nuclear option. You know, let's blow it up. At Lake Gaston, that was not the approach. It was a slow kind of matriculation down to a manageable population, which is where it is now. But you go over to like TVA lakes in Tennessee, they're like manually harvesting. You know, cutting strips so that people can navigate, but they don't get rid of the SAV. You know, they're leaving it for fish habitat. Florida has a totally different approach in different places. You know, so I mean, there's not a magic bullet, and there's not a right. I don't know that there's a 100% right answer. Every situation is different, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's hard because I think sometimes like it's the money that you're granted to do the research needed to be able to adjust things. And this has been talked about when I had Halleck talking about them starting the playbook for smallmouth, raising smallmouth. It's like you need the money to be able to do the research, to do the thing, to change it, and that's a terrible cycle. So it's like, you know, because I talked to him about the grass. He's like, yeah, that'd be great. We just need the money to do the study to figure out what's best. And like, people don't get that aren't in the know. Like, it's a whole thing to get to where you want to go. It's not just snap your fingers and y'all can just fix it.
Sure. No, yeah. I mean, I've said that before. Is we don't just do anything. Like, everything is a plan. Like Corey said, sometimes it takes a couple years to get that plan together, you know, depending on how significant of a plan it is. So,
yeah, and it's difficult a lot of times, people expect, things to happen rapidly.
Yeah.
Nothing really, I mean, you can lose something pretty quick in the natural world, but that's still very unusual. Building something back in the natural world takes time. It's just not, you can't
If
do
it's
that.
possible.
If it's possible. If it's even possible. It doesn't take a year. It takes 10 years. I mean, you got to think about, like, in the fish's life, like, let's look at striped bass on the coast, which same things are happening up around your way that are happening down here.
Yeah.
Striped bass are struggling. We don't really have the magic. We haven't figured out the magic bullet, because if we had, we'd done fixed it, of what's causing reproductive problems. Let's just say we figure out the magic bullet that figures out reproductive problems. It's still a 10, 15, 20-year process because of the life cycle of that fish before you really get the population back to a place where you go, yeah, we got it where it needs to be, from where we are right now.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's fascinating. I had on the David Sikorsky, who helps out with, like, the Chesapeake Bay Association up where I'm at, and I've had Gary on, who used to be with the Potomac River Association. I think he's up in New York now, but we talked about the death of the striper, the Chesapeake. But what's fascinating is that it's an evolution of, when I was a kid, it was blues and it was striper, and now the specks, the redfish, there are shrimp in the bay. There's tarpon, for God's sakes, in certain portions. That was never there. So it's like the fishery's changing and evolving over time, but it's not dead. And are you guys seeing that kind of evolution and change on the coast, or is it pretty much just little things that are changing?
Yeah, I would say, we always had shrimp for the most part. But yeah, we're seeing some changes. We're seeing some, and it may be that these changes that we're seeing are reasons why we're having trouble with, the timing of the herring run. And is the herring spawning now because of the environmental changes we're seeing? Is it just the biology of the fish isn't matching up with the thermal regime that we're seeing? So if it's getting warmer earlier in the year, and it seems to be, at least in the trend that we're currently in, then is that a mismatch for that species? And do they not have what they need at the moment when they can actually spawn, And if the herring don't do good, well, guess what? Striped bass riding on the backs of herring, so, they're not going to do good. And, and that's one of the biggest challenges we have is there's a lot of these, and it's never, a steel barrel with skull and crossbones tilted over on its side on the side of the bank. It's not the smoking gun that they told us about in elementary school. It's actually probably 35 smaller that are all additive. And all taking their own part of what's going on. And it becomes really hard to tease all that out and say, okay, the solution is X. Because the solution really isn't one thing. The solution likely 15 small things that'll at least let us get a foothold so that we can figure out the next 15 small things.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Ben. He and I talk about this all the time, not on our podcast. I mean, we talk about it on our podcast, but we talk about it just together. When it comes to things like striped bass, it's just there's so many things that could affect that. I mean, we don't know what effect dams have had, over the long term. I mean, we're 100 years out on a lot of dams on the coast, in the coastal plain of North Carolina. Same thing up in Virginia and Delmarva area. Those dams are probably 100, 120 years old, something like that. We don't know what effect that's had over that period of time. Is that a long-term death, or was that a short-term death and they got over it? Don't know. He knows my thing about river herring. We're talking about a fish that was by the billions of pounds in North Carolina, and all the way up really to the Bay of Fundy. I mean, they were way up the East Coast, and it crashed over a 10, 15-year period, something like that.
The big decline was over about 10, 15 years.
And then the crash was like a nosedive right at the end. And that's an animal that striped bass need coming into the river, and that's an animal that the baby striped bass need going out of the river. And without that animal being there, and they are in very low-level populations in North Carolina and really all along the Atlantic seaboard, I mean, striped bass have had to find something different, and if you look at the crash of herring and then look at kind of the crash of stripers, it's like, okay, Herring's life cycle, you understand that crash. The striper's life cycle is much, much longer. And so you're getting the back end of, this is my theory, have no proof. You're getting the back end of their life cycle now where they haven't had the herring. You know, they're a much longer lived species. And so those older animals are dying. The older, bigger fish are dying out. And those are the reproductive animals that we need. And so there's nothing there to replace them because there's nothing there going down through that cycle because the herring aren't there to feed them anymore.
Do you think the herring was more to the environment, or was it some kind of virus that killed out the species?
No, it was overfishing. We fished the absolute snot out of them. Commercial fishing, there's probably environmental factors linked to it. Once again, just like Ben said, it's not one thing. But
there could be a big thing.
Ben, what was the number in North Carolina in its heyday?
Well, yeah, North Carolina and the Chowan River in particular was ground zero for herring harvest. Millions of pounds every year were coming out of that river. And they were coming out of the creeks, they were coming out of the rivers, they were coming out of the sounds, they were being caught in the ocean. Like, there was never a place in their life history in the 70s, let's just say. In the 70s, there was never a place in their life history where they weren't being harvested as heavy as they could.
Yep.
And they were in such high abundances.
Nobody thought.
My granddaddy was level 1 predator of the herring, They were in such high abundances that you could scoop them with a 5-foot dip net.
In a ditch.
And so, no fault of them, it did seem like a seemingly limitless resource, because there are so many, I can scoop them up,
Those are the talks on the Chesapeake too. It's just the overfishing that has happened, where you have like companies from Canada coming down into the bay because of legislation and all that other stuff that happens up in D.C. God forbid. But that's a whole other black hole. I could go down there, but it's hard when you get so many organizations running over a piece. Because I know, like the Potomac, I think there's 4 organizations that run the Potomac. You have the Virginia side, you have the Maryland side, and then you have the international zone. And you have to get all 4 organizations, because the Chesapeake Bay is also there too, to talk about how the heck, it's like trying to get a monkey to hump a football to get all these people together to come up with a plan. And that's just got to be frustrating. And I don't know, like with your jurisdiction, when it comes to the sounds, to the ocean, and then like you have to then talk with other people just to get anything to be moved.
Sure. And North Carolina is very similar. Yeah. I'm involved in that a lot. And, and the other side of that is in all honesty, all of the agencies have the same goal. They want there to be plenty of stripers. We want to restore the population. Like, the end goal is not horribly divergent. There may be, like, one group has certain theories and one group has another theory. And where I try to be is, one, we need to be communicating enough so that we at least know where each other's coming from. So that way, when a decision that we have to work on together comes up, we at least understand the thought process that each group has.
That's right.
And then, as far as implementing that, we need to be working together and considerate enough to, yes, we can have divergent theories. That's cool. And, and probably healthy, And if we have divergent theories, well, maybe the management actions that we take just don't undermine the other one, and at least agree to that level that, we're going to work together in a point that we're not just, because if one group has one theory and one group has another, well, now we're testing two theories. So that's a net win, because one of us may be right, one of us may be removing something off the list that we don't have to look at anymore, if nothing else. So, but there's a lot of communication that needs to happen, a lot of grace with each other, a lot of understanding, and it's a lot of research. And, to be honest, if it's done well, it's done thoughtfully, it should be more, because you have more fish biologists working on a problem at that point, right? So that's the hope, is that when there's multiple agencies working on a problem, now it's not always how it's executed, but the hope is that you can get to a point where you have more people who are highly trained in this very select field that are thinking about this problem and trying to find a solution. So that should be a win, not problematic. And so when you approach it, and we don't always do it well, but that's how we need to try to get these things accomplished. So, but yeah, it is, and Fish and Wildlife Service sometimes sees things different than Division of Marine Fisheries, or sometimes sees things different than we do. And that's great because we have a lot of good minds that are thinking about a lot of things at the same time.
No. Guys, I mean, I could probably talk to you for 10 hours, but the people get upset with the scheduling here. When's your next episode drop? Where can people find you?
So our next episode should drop this week. I want to say Tuesday or Wednesday of this week, which is January the 13th or 14th or something like that. You can find us on our website at ncwildlife.org. You'll see, go to Better Fishing with Two Ball Biologists. The podcast is right there on the main page. It'll take you to wherever. We're on everywhere. We're Apple, iTunes, Spotify, you name it. We're on it. Amazon Music. We're starting video. We haven't done video up until now, but we're starting video in January, and then we'll be doing video. We do one a month. That's basically our schedule. Every once in a while.
That might be short-lived once they see what we look like.
Yeah. The video might be short-lived for sure. I said we'll try it and we'll see, because not doing video, it's pretty easy stuff. We'll see how the video works out for us. But we'd love for people to come listen to us. We talk about, you've heard it. We talk about biology all the time. We're nerds. Even though we don't, I might look like one. You don't look like one, but that's okay.
No,
he's a better fisherman than me. So if you want to learn about fishing, listen in. He'll teach you how to catch a fish.
No, it's been a lot of fun. We talk to people. I probably get 5 to 15 emails a week from our listeners, and it's great. I really have enjoyed it, and y'all tune in, and we'd love to hear from you.
Guys, go check them out. They're down here at the Raleigh Fishing Expo. Go check out their podcast. We need more of this information out there so you don't get those weird conversations at the boat ramp where they just need to go do this and that. Like, listen to these people. They are humans, and they really do care about our environment. What we're going to be doing here, we're going to be taking a quick break here before we got about 2 more interviews today before I'm allowed to collapse. So we'll be seeing you guys soon. About 10 to 15-minute break. We'll talk to you later.
fish? No. You know, people who...
All righty, everybody. We are back here at the Raleigh Fishing Expo. Sorry, it has been an absolutely long day. I'm here with our next guest of the afternoon. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Yeah, please, if you could tell the audience, like, what are you here for today?
Right. My name is Matt Tours, and I am here to help represent the USA surfcasting team, which is part of USA Angling, if you're familiar with that organization. This was a team that we started forming up about a year ago. And if anybody, do you want me to get into surf casting as the sport? Because not a lot of people
yeah, absolutely.
are aware of that.
I guess first, how'd you get into it would be a good start, and kind of go from there, right?
Me personally, so I'm a surf fisherman. Started maybe about 10, 15 years ago as far as my adult fishing career. Got on the beaches, and I realized at one point that being able to cast at long distance and fish at long range was going to be helpful in that scenario. Not all the time, but it's a helpful tool to have in your arsenal if you're a surf fisherman or a pier fisherman or even for catfish. So I started watching a bunch of YouTube videos, practicing what I was learning, and started hitting some distances that I at least impressed myself with. Then I found out, and I sort of knew about long-distance surf casting, which is an actual sport where people take the surf fishing tackle, the long rods and the reels, the specially tuned reels out onto a field to see who can cast the farthest. It's almost more of an athletic competition than having to do with fishing. So I finally got, through practicing, I finally got to a distance where I felt comfortable entering one of those, which I did. That was 2021, right after COVID. And after that, it became a little bit of an obsession. About 2 years ago, I was asked to take over an organization called the Carolina Surfcasters Association, which is based right here in North Carolina. And we actually put on these events, these surfcasting tournaments, up in Virginia, down in South Carolina, and we have members all over from Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North and South Carolina. We even have people who come out from Texas for these. And then, as I said, about a year ago, well, let me back up. So we have a member named Ryan Lambert, who is a really good surf fisherman, but also, as of right now, the best long-distance caster in the United States. So he hit a new national record in, I think it was April of last year, 889 feet. He cast a 125 gram or 4.5 ounce sinker. So we thought myself and others in the community thought that it was about time that we put together a surf fishing team to represent the United States and to compete internationally. Overseas in England, Europe, South America, this is actually a much more popular sport than it is here. Yeah. So that an organization called FIPS Mare, Federish International Pescatore, or what, I don't know, it's Italian or something, the name of this organization, but they put on all kinds of not surfcasting, but all kinds of fishing competitions all over the world, for bass fishing, I think kayak fishing, you name it. But they've been doing surfcasting competitions for quite a long time, several decades, I believe. But the last time that an American actually made an appearance in one of those was about 20 years ago, to my knowledge. Okay. So now that we have somebody, and actually more than one person, we'll get into that, people who are, have either broken U.S. records recently or on the cusp of breaking U.S. distance casting records, and they're doing that consistently, and they have the interest, we are assembling, or at this point have assembled our first USA surfcasting team. And they asked me to help, Ryan Lambert asked me to jump in and help out as their communications director.
Wow, that's insane.
Yep.
Like, I mean, again, this is what I love about doing this, is you find out about all these different niche little sports, and you're taking a niche of a niche, so to speak, going from surf fishing to surf casting. What for people that are going to be listening in right now or on the re-upload later on? What is considered a cast length? When you say a casting competition, some people might think 50 feet, 90 feet, 200 feet. Like, what are we talking about?
Well, at our competitions for the Carolina Surfcasters Association, we have everybody from beginners, people, surf fishermen who just want to get a little bit, watch what the top guys are doing to apply some of those elements to their own cast so that they can catch more fish and cover more water at the beach. Some of them are casting, 400, 450 feet when they show up at one of our competitions. The guys who have been in it for a couple years and put in a reasonable amount of practice, they might be right around 600 feet, such as myself. And then the top people like Ryan Lambert, another one of our team members out in Texas, Daniel Nassif, and Connor Brown, who's from South Carolina. He's a relative newcomer to the sport, but they're all hitting over 800 feet pretty consistently.
So for people listening at home, you can stand at home plate and at 90%, all of the baseball fields in the MLB, you can basically cast it out of the park. That's insane.
Yes. not just out of the field, but out of the stadium.
That is freaking insane. Like, that's got to be some wear and tear on your body. We're talking about torque that you have to do when you're throwing that thing.
Yeah, we do encounter, if there's any common injury I've seen, it is golfer's elbow.
That makes sense. Okay.
And I don't think we have the time or the capability to really go into techniques, but it involves a lot of pull. Most of these guys are right-handed, so and the way they're casting is they're pulling really hard with their left arm, and so you really need to take care of your left shoulder and
your tricep, your scaps, things like that. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess your obliques too, because you have to really engage your core, right, to really whip that thing around.
Yeah, and the core muscles, they're going to be a lot more powerful than your arms. Really, the arms are kind of an afterthought to long-distance surf casting. Once you get really good and really getting the technique down, you're going to find that it's mostly core and legs is where you're getting your power.
Now, when you're doing a competition like this where you have technique, but there's also technology involved, like a classic example that everyone knows, like NASCAR, they had to standardize, like, okay, you can only have so much technology to make it kind of fair. When you do a competition, is it like you're casting the same weight to have at the end of the line for distance, the same everything, or what do they allow you to do?
Yeah, so in an official competition, there are 4 different sinker sizes or weights that we cast. There's 125, there's 100 gram, which is about 3 ounces, 125 gram, which is 4, 150 gram, which is about 5 ounces, and then 175. In the international competition that's put together by Phipps Mare, the World Championships, you have to be able to cast every single one of those weights. They do. The competition goes for about a week, or 4 days, I should say, and each day you're casting a different sinker weight. And then the other thing that's put into play to kind of level the playing field is line diameter. With each of those weights, you're only allowed to use so thin a line when you're casting it, because what they've found over the years is that the thinner the line, you can get a lot of distance just by using a thinner line, or if you're talking fishing terms, a lower pound test.
Is there, I guess, like in my novice brain, I guess there's a deal with the devil that the lighter you go, because of the torque, you have a higher probability of snapping, correct? So when you think, when I think light line, I'm thinking 4-pound test, 8-pound test. Are you guys getting that low when you're doing these rigs?
Right. Well, there are 2 elements when you're talking about line. There's main line, which is going to be, you'll have about 300 yards of that on your spool when you're casting. But for safety and like say 100 gram sinkers, when we're casting that, the minimum line diameter that you can use is 0.25 millimeters, which actually does come out to about 8-pound test monofilament. We only use monofilament in competitions.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. But you're right, and obviously that's going to snap if you try to cast anything over, half an ounce or an ounce with that. So what we use for safety purposes is called a shock leader. Now that's when we bump up to 50 to 60 pound test monofilament, and we run a length about 30 feet.
Okay.
Kind of like a top shot type situation. That you attach to the main line to where you get a couple wraps around the spool of whatever reel that you're using, and then out down the rod and out to the sinker. So 50 to 60 pound test monofilament can absorb these pressures that we're putting on the rod and the sinker.
Why did they decide on mono versus braid or fluorocarbon and copy polymers? How did that decision be made for that to be the standard?
The way I've heard that explained is that and I mentioned the minimum line diameter limits. We actually have a caliper or let's just use the word caliper for now. We actually measure the line diameters to make sure that everybody's using the appropriate line. Otherwise, they would be disqualified if they're using something thinner than that threshold. I've never tried it myself. The previous person who ran the Carolina Surfcasters Association, according to him, when you try to measure braid, it tends to flatten out. So it's hard to get a measurement off of it.
That makes sense.
I've heard anecdotal complaints that the braid. So the way a competition works, everybody casts one after another at the baseline. The Aki is what we call it, and then we have a measured field that goes out like 1,000 yards or so. So everybody casts one after another, and then once you have your cast, you put your rod down and walk off, step away from the Aki, and then the next person comes in, and then once everybody has done their cast for that round, everybody picks up their rods and then reels their line in. And what I'm getting at is I've heard anecdotally that if somebody was to use braid, there's a risk that that braid might sever somebody else's line as well.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Do you have is there a limit on the length of your rod?
No, there is not.
Interesting.
No.
Why?
Well, if I had to guess at that, the optimal, depending on your height and your level of strength, the optimal rod length for casting for like a human being is going to be to get the most distance once they have a reasonable amount of skill is going to be about between 13.5 to 14.5 feet. To where if somebody did want to go longer than that, they're welcome to. The chances are, unless there's there's something really strange about them physically, it's really not going to benefit them.
So, basically, the length, if you could, in theory, throw a 20-foot rod, that's fine. But it's that, do you have the ability to generate enough force for the torque to work?
Yeah, that you would. Even somebody like Ryan Lambert, who's a top caster, if he picked up a 20-foot rod that was just as thick and had the same action and power that as his 14-foot rod, he would not be able to bring that around as fast. And of course, he would have a longer arc, a longer path for the lead to travel through. It would not compensate for the loss of speed that he would be able, with which he would be able to bring that rod around.
Yeah, in baseball, we always called that like your swing weight, because if you had two bats that were always the same weight no matter what, and one was 3 feet and one was 10, even if they were the same weight, the 10-foot bat you would swing slower because of the drag that you would create in the air, which is interesting to think about, because when you think of a 14-foot rod, like how heavy, for people that don't know, like what kind of weight are you holding when you're launching with that thing?
The rod and the reel combined?
Yeah.
The rods, like the really powerful tournament rods that we use, I wish I could do the conversion off the top of my head. You're talking about 800 to 900 grams
Okay.
for the rod blank. And then the reels, for obvious reasons, we try to keep them as light as possible by using aluminum components. I haven't measured one of those lately.
So 13 to 15 pounds
The weight of the
total.
no, the reel maybe weighs about 120 grams.
Okay.
I know my fishing reel weighs 120 grams, and it's a close approximation for what we use for casting as well. So it's pretty lightweight stuff, and it needs to be just like most sporting equipment.
That's impressive. That's really crazy. I mean, I guess this again, like technology's gotten to the point where you can do that and have things as light as possible like that, which is insane.
Yeah.
Because in any type of fishing, it's always about casting distance. What is the biggest thing? If you had to pick one that is the bigger attribute to distance, is it the reel, the size of the spool, or is it the length of the rod that will generate you more distance if you had to pick one?
I would say that that is really tough. I would say the rod is having that rod length. I think is the most important thing. I mean, if you're trying to distance cast with an 8-foot rod versus a 13-foot rod, obviously, you're not going to get the same results. But I would say rod. If you're getting a little bit more granular with it, the rod action, the rod weight, the rod power are going to be huge factors if you're trying to get into competitive casting. And a lot of people spend years looking for the right rod for them.
When you're doing a casting competition, are you having to go from a stance without any movement in your lower half, or are you allowed to take a couple of steps, almost like a javelin throw or something like that? Like, what are the rules around the technique in which for you to be able to actually cast in a competition?
Yeah, you can take steps. It's a lot of the people involved in with the USA surfcasting team are former athletes, baseball players, track and field, football. If you talk to them, it is a lot like swinging a baseball bat combined with shot put, maybe. So yeah, you're taking a couple steps. You're relying on a lot of body rotation. The thing that makes it, in my opinion, hard on the body physically as well is that instead of any kind of follow through like you would do with a baseball bat, you have to stop on a dime. You have to stop your whole body and your arms right on the dime, pointed in the direction that you want your cast to go.
Interesting. Yeah, that sudden stop could lead to injury for sure.
Yeah.
Segueing this to like just the fishing world and things like that, what are some things that you reflect on that made you a better angler once you started to do these competitions for casting distance?
I think this would be the same for anybody who gets into the sport, is just where it helps with angling, of course, is increasing the amount of water that you're able to cover when you go to the beach or go to the pier. I think Ryan Lambert is coming on after me. He's actually, I think, going to be speaking on the USA surf fishing team. I'll let him tell the full story, but he and the USA surf fishing team were down in Costa Rica for a Pan Am tournament, and because of his skill set, he was able to, one of the days, put baits out where nobody else in the competition could. And again, he'll tell you all about it, but let's just say it paid off for him.
That's a good tease. That's a really good tease. I mean, dude, we've covered a lot of things, but like, is there anything else that we need to make sure that we hit on?
No, I can give the people a couple resources if they're interested in looking into this, either for fishing or if the competitive side of it sounds interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so if you go to USA, so the USA surfcasting team, I can't remember if I explained this or not, but it's part of USA Angling, or completely the USA Angling Confederation, which has all these different teams that mostly compete in the FIPS international competitions. They've got the big bass team with some celebrities on that. So our webpage is hosted by them. It's usangling.org/surf-casting. Would be where you want to go to learn about the USA surfcasting team and also make a tax-deductible donation to the team. We're trying to raise money for equipment and accommodations and travel. We're going to be going to Argentina.
Oh, that's cool.
In the that's the next World Championships is in Argentina, the Buenos Aires area, April this year now. And then if you're interested in coming out to a local competition that we put on here in Virginia, and then we have another venue in South Carolina, go to carolinasurfcasters.org, and that's where we post our schedule. We should be putting our dates for 2025 together pretty soon and posting those. And we have a YouTube channel for the Carolina Surfcasters Association as well. If your viewers and listeners want to click over there and take a look at what a surfcasting competition looks like.
Awesome stuff. Dude, guys, go check all that stuff out. That is fascinating. I mean, I didn't know that there was casting competitions like that out there. I mean, it makes perfect sense, especially being international like that. That also makes a lot of sense. I've seen people like this on Instagram in Japan and places like that. Please go check them out. Come on here down to the booth here at Raleigh. We're going to be open for a couple more hours here tonight. We are going to be taking, again, a quick commercial break before we get back to our next couple of guests to finish out the evening here. Sir, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your hosts, Thomas Ahrens and Jared Mounts. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
All righty, guys, we are back right here. How's everyone doing? Mic check it. Let me guys know how we all sound here. We are continuing with the Saltwater extravaganza, talking about surf fishing, and we have an absolute legend here. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, just if you could tell the people at home, like, you know, who are you and how you really got into this crazy sport?
Yeah, so my name's Ryan Lambert. I'm a member of the United States surfcasting and surf fishing teams. Got involved with U.S. Angling is the parent organization that really regulates and allows us to compete as a country in international competition. So I've been involved with them since October of 23, and this will be the first year that we compete internationally in the casting realm. We competed for the first time since 2021 in October of 23 in the Pan American Championships, and you know, just a way to represent our country, get more into almost an unrecognized sport in the United States, and really draw more attention to it.
It's so cool, like when I start doing this and I find out about all these really cool parts of the fishing community, whether it's the musky guys, the walleye guys down here, crappie, surf fishing, and the casting thing where you can basically stay at the bottom of Fenway Park and pod launch it out of the stadium. That's insane to me.
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the distance casting sport, it's kind of oddball. I mean, you see couple dozen guys out in the middle of the field casting rods and no water in sight. I mean, it looks strange, but when you really apply what you're able to learn through different techniques and studying the sport, it really translates well to surf fishing, especially when you think about hard ground. A lot of the European guys in England, Ireland, Scotland, look at the Northeast up towards Montauk. Look at the jetty guys down in South Florida and Texas. You know, distance is absolutely crucial in a lot of these fisheries. And so that's one thing that we're trying to teach for our own fishery out here in the Outer Banks. It's not about the ability to catch fish. Everybody knows that they're in the first cut, first two troughs. What if they're not? You know, what if you see Spanish? What if you see albacore and they're just out of reach? Would that 25, 50 yards extra, could that come into play? And, you know, from my experience, absolutely.
Is there a heated debate in your community about casting distance and how important it is?
What's that?
Is there a big debate in your community about casting distance and how important it is to surf fishing?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we're posed with a question, or rather the statement that we're casting over the fish. You know, sometimes that might be true, but if we're able to hook up at a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 rate, you know, that translates into a higher hookup rate, and that's ultimately what we want to do. Fishing's a lot more fun when we're catching. But it goes back to any other talent you might have. Just because you're able to cast it 150 or 200 yards doesn't always mean you have to employ it. You know, if they're fishing right, catching right in the first ditch, it's where we'll fish. But those times, you know, case in point at the Pan American Championships on day 2 in Costa Rica, we were waded out to the 3rd and 4th bar, chest deep water. The only clean water on the beach was about 150 yards past the 4th bar.
Wow.
And so we had to wade out, and because myself and one other of the U.S. team members were able to cast that distance with metal, we caught fish. Nobody else did.
And for the people at home that don't know, what does it mean by metal?
So any type of metal jig.
Okay.
It could be, you know, like a wounded herring. It could be a gator spoon. Anything that has basically an aerodynamic shape, you'll drastically increase your casting ability, casting distance that way. Things like jacks, Spanish, bluefish, stripers, reds, anything predatory type fish, they'll take a metal bait. And so that's a way that we can get more distance out of it and cover more water.
That's interesting. I think that's good for people to understand is you're actually casting a moving bait. It's not like you're just throwing a bottom rig out there. So you're the sweet spot of your cast is a lot smaller than people think. Oh, you casted, 100 feet or 110 feet. It's like, yeah, but the area is only 10 feet. That's actually the juice, so to speak, on your cast, right?
So it is a mix of casting ability and power and technique, but you've also got to have that precision and the finesse. And even in the casting world, we've got a 30-degree wedge, and you get out there at 800 or 900 feet, that's a fairly large target. But if you're trying to play the wind and get very technical about it, you really want to be as precise as you can be. So if you're aiming one particular spot, you want to be able to land a grouping within 10 feet at 750 plus feet out there.
What's it like going internationally and competing? Like, what was your first time like?
Yeah, so there's just something different about it. I mean, everybody grows up watching the Olympics. That's as close as I can equate it to. And being on international soil, holding up your country's flag, having medals put around your neck for winning, it's hard to describe. One of the goals of U.S. angling looking forward is to try and make fishing, not just saltwater, but fishing in general, an internationally recognized sport and be brought into the Olympics. U.S. Angling is partnered with Bass Pro Shops, and we're trying to head the effort into reaching out to the Olympic Committee and get these fishing, predator fishing, ice fishing, saltwater surf, big game, bass fishing. We want all of those disciplines into, the Olympics, the Summer Olympics.
I mean, it's sad to say, and this is my own thoughts here. Like, bass fishing is probably the most of the nichest of the niche for the fishing sports when you compare it to like a surf fishing, where, let's face it, some of these bass boats, it's like the GDP of an African country, but everyone can surf fish. Like, it seems like it's more readily available to countries and people in them, no matter where you're at.
Yeah, that's right. I think if you go to some of these international places that have more miles of shoreline versus their total area, versus something like the United States, I think bass fishing is easy to see how it's such a bigger sport. You got lakes in every state across the nation, and so that's kind of universal. Whereas somebody in the Dakotas, Iowa, they might have never surf fished before. That's just sheer circumstance that they end up on a vacation and might get hooked to saltwater fishing. So that's kind of where we lag behind a little bit. Some of these competitors like Italy, Central American countries, Costa Rica, Panama, South America, they live and die by surf fishing.
Really? Interesting. So where was the first place you traveled?
Costa Rica was the first place I've traveled with U.S. Angling to compete.
What was that like?
It was different. You're going to a stretch of beach you've never been to. You get off a 6-hour flight and take a 4-hour bus ride to get to the beach.
Dang.
Where we fished was in northeastern Costa Rica. I'd been previously one time to the Pacific side and kind of had that crystal blue water, deep water in mind. And being that we were on the eastern side fishing the Caribbean Sea, it's completely different. It was fishing trashy chocolate milk.
Really interesting.
We looked at depth charts leading into it, tried to do as much research as we could, but ultimately it was trial and error. Changing different baits, different presentation styles, and that tournament in particular was all artificial. So it's not like you're waiting on something to come pick up your bait. You were purely covering water. And we kind of knew the target species, knew what our strategy was, but there was a lot of team communication, what's working, what's not. But ultimately, it comes back to each team member playing on their strengths. If I have the ability to cast farther and cover more water, with a particular bait, that's what I'm going to try to do to help the team. If somebody is better at finesse and snook fishing, we had team members from North Carolina to California, Minnesota,
how many
North
teammates?
Dakota. So this was 14.
14, okay.
Yes, sir. We had 11 guys, 3 ladies, and so we're really trying to get the program ramped back up. COVID sent it in a tail spiral. So on that particular team, we had seniors represented who would be the men's senior team. We had a men's team represented, we had a women's team represented, and also a youth team represented. We had a 16-year-old with us.
Wow.
And so that's kind of our mentality, is to bring this to the forefront of everybody's minds and show them the opportunities to represent our country in an international event.
That's crazy. How for people at home, like, how does the scoring work for that? Is it by the fish? Is it length, weight?
Yeah, so in the Pan American rules, which is just North America, Central, South America, it's all catch and release, all artificial, length-based. Okay. So each target species, for Costa Rica, it was jack crevalle, tarpon, snook, barracuda, shark. So each fish, with tarpon being the highest scored fish, had its own base value with a minimum length of 35 centimeters. Anything over that length was scored for the fish score plus the length. And so it's all length, all catch and release. And so in that style of fishing, you have to keep that in the back of your mind. If you hook up a 100-pound tarpon off the beach and decide to play it for 4 hours, that's great. But if that fish doesn't swim away healthy, it doesn't score.
Okay.
So, sustainability is big in the Pan American Games. Not saying it's not on the world stage, but it's a completely different set of rules next November in Portugal, which will be the Shore Angling Championships. That is natural bait versus artificial. It's based more on weight than it is on length. So it's a totally different set of rules.
What are those conditions going to be like?
Unknown. I mean, to be honest with you, like I said, we're currently preparing for the World Championships for casting in Argentina in April, and so we're more focused on that at the moment. The team president for the surf fishing team is based out of California, so I'm kind of leaving that in his wheelhouse to do the preparations for November.
Have you done any surf fishing on the Pacific Ocean side of things?
Have not. Never been to the Pacific side to fish.
Are you going to be dabbling in that when you go to Argentina for the casting, or is it just strictly business?
Argentina will be casting actually on the eastern side.
Oh, okay.
So down there, it's strictly business. It's going to be 5 days of hard casting all day, and kind of got a one-track mind. Got a mission that we're trying to accomplish, and as American casters, we're not viewed very well.
Why?
Nobody in the U.S. has ever hit 900 feet. So the 300-yard mark has eluded us all. I'm about 10 and a half feet short currently at 889 and change.
That's insane.
If you look at some of the numbers from South America, from Europe, they've hit 900 feet. Our contention is where we cast, where our groups are in South Central Texas and North Carolina. We have completely different environments, height above sea level, relative humidity, obviously wind, all those things play into it. So, we're of the opinion that if we're on the same field the same day as international casters, hopefully we're able to show that we can hold our own. And with that, really bring more notoriety, more excitement about the sport of casting to the United States. And, ultimately we're going to drive home the correlation between distance casting and fishing.
How much, when it comes to the distance, is it just the culture and the topography of the places that you're at? I mean, if you're in Japan or Hawaii where it drops off pretty steep. Is there a reason for that casting distance is more preferable there versus here in the Carolinas or up in Virginia where, the shelf is, 30 miles off?
Right. I think a lot of it is, it depends on what you're targeting.
Okay.
So if you're talking saltwater species in New England, you've got rocky shoreline. You need to get away from those rocks, whether you're targeting bluefish, striped bass. These guys are up there launching 6-ounce plugs all day. Obviously, that's mainly to cover water. It could be that your bait schools are staying off those rocks some because they don't want to get pinned in. And so you've got to be able to cover water. Not dissimilar from a lot of places in England. A lot of your drop-offs, you think about fishing giant trevally in Hawaii, shore-based tuna fishing, stuff like that. You want distance. To me, that's no different from fishing, let's say, southern North Carolina, northern South Carolina, where the shoreline cuts in away from the Gulf Stream, and you've got a lot of manicured beaches, and as such, that the depth is just not there. I mean, it's a very flat beach. You can go out 400 yards and you're still only in 12 feet of water.
Yeah.
So part of it is still being able to read the beach, know what you're targeting, but if you're able to identify a hole, say at low tide, that's 150 yards off the beach, and I said, if you have that extra 25 yards in your cast or extra 50 yards, you're able to hit those little holes on a flat beach that are going to hold the fish. Otherwise, you're just, hoping to get lucky, honestly.
When you're moving plugs and you're casting them and you're pegging a cast, let's say 800 feet, dear God, that's a lot of line. It's a lot of winding. Are you doing, how high up do the gear ratio reels go for surf? Do you keep them low in the 5, or do you want something like a 10? Where is it?
Some of it depends on what you're doing, what you're targeting. If you're throwing a 1-ounce spoon, something that's not going to have a really heavy sink rate, you can't really afford to have a 7 or 8 to 1 ratio and really rip it through because you're going to stay right there at the top. If the fish are feeding right on the surface, that's perfectly fine. I'll kind of back up a little bit. We are able to hit 800 plus feet in the distance casting realm, but to say that's possible with a baited hook or even a jig, somebody might be able to. I'm not. Realistically, with a jig, 200 yards is well within reach. Now, environmental conditions are different. You get a headwind, things change.
Yeah.
But assuming everything's perfect, we're still only talking a couple hundred yards. But most of the folks who think they can achieve really good distances, 150, 200 yards out, are nowhere even close. Not to say they can't get there with a little bit of training technique tweak, but for most purposes, folks can't quite cast as far as they think.
How much dead water, you mentioned throwing a plug, and let's say, you do have some schooling stripers, we'll go with that, maybe false albacore close end. How much dead water is there when you're pegging a 100-yard, 200-yard cast with a plug? Is it just really that back, the very end of the cast that's important, and then you're just trying to get it in as fast as possible for the next cast?
I think a lot of that depends on the species. If you got something that spooks easily, if you're targeting, let's say, late season cobia that have had jigs thrown at them from Florida all the way to North Carolina or Virginia, you're going to want to leave a 20 or 30 foot or even yard buffer past that fish and pull it past and present it to them. Same with tarpon. You land a bait on a tarpon's nose, he's gone. You've got to be able to cast it past the fish, pull it across his nose at a 45-degree angle so as not to spook him. Something like a bluefish, he doesn't care. Hit him in the head, he's going to probably eat it.
Yeah.
So
Kobe is interesting. I brought that up because, again, usually you have boats with the crow's nest to be able to see them. And you mentioned tarpon a couple of times. When you guys are getting into a competition or whatever, how can you hedge your chances of putting it in front of them? Are you able to use technology or something in particular to find them, to be able to lead them on a cast?
We've talked about trying to employ drones, and that's something that is changing kind of the whole scouting of surfishing, I guess. We talked a little bit before we went on air about dropping baits out with drones. That's a great tool to scout beach. Really easy for you to identify schools of fish, troughs, cuts, rips. That can really narrow down where you want to target the fish. Now, as far as being in competition and using that, to this point, I don't have any experience with it. I would almost foresee moving into the future that there would have to be some kind of regulations against it. And say, it would be a huge benefit to anybody who would do that.
Oh my God, yeah. It's like the forward-facing sonar debate, I think.
Yeah,
of bass
that's
fishing.
right. And a beach similar to the one in Costa Rica where you got really dirty water. Typically, if we fish tarpon up here, it's really clean water. Doesn't matter if you're, northern South Carolina, North Carolina especially, ocean running tarpon is kind of what I'm referring to. They're going to be in clean water. Down there, they were in the middle of the chocolate milk, and you would see them when they were right on top of you, 10, 15 yards away. So it's a very quick reaction to seeing that fish, processing which direction it's going, and then making your best guess at a presentation to that fish to pull it across his nose, but not straight into him.
That makes sense. That's fascinating. And even like a surf fishing tarpon world, like I didn't even think of that. I just think about flats boats and maybe some bottom bumping things, but that's fascinating.
Yeah, if you think about some of these fisheries like the Outer Banks, even up towards Virginia Beach, late season, get into late August, September, early October, you've got some nor'easters pushing these fish out of the Chesapeake Bay back down the beach, but you've got enough easterly wind to it that it pushes all this warm, clean water right to the beach. There have been some crazy catches off the coast of Southern Virginia and North Carolina. Talk about bonefish, even Dorado, lots of cobia, tarpon. I mean, that's why there's so much draw to that area from Virginia Beach to Buxton, is that time of the year, you really have no clue what you're going to catch.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, you live in such a great place where you have such a great inshore fishing variety. I mean, again, growing up, we just had striper and blues, really. I mean, now the Chesapeake Bay has this huge influx of specks, of redfish. The cobia scene is insane down by the bridge. But here, I mean, you can drive just a little distance and experience so many different variety of fish species. It's incredible.
That's right. I think through a mix of, conservation, we can argue on the restrictions on some of our fisheries, but, I do think Division of Marine Fisheries has done a good job of managing the resource. We're in a good spot, thankfully, where we're close enough to the Gulf Stream that we do see a lot of influx late season of some species that, quite frankly, unless you go to Florida, you're not going to get a chance at. And it's extremely diverse. You can go trout fishing one day, flounder fishing the next, and then go just offshore and target pelagics. So, we're lucky where we're at.
No, I mean, this is a beautiful area of the country. You have to come on down and see it. Ryan, if people want to support you or follow you, how could they do that?
Yeah, so you can go to usangling.org and check out all of the United States teams. You'll have bass fishing, predator, ice, all the way to kayak fishing, obviously surf and surf casting, surf fishing, surf casting teams will be on there. We are operated as a 501c3 nonprofit, and so we're actively trying to find partner sponsors to work with on that front. As far as our local distance casting chapters, we've got one based in North Carolina called the Carolina Surfcasters Association, and then Surfcast USA is actually based out of Maryland. and both of us operate between South Carolina and the Maryland, Delaware area.
Okay.
And you can check us out on Facebook, Instagram. Any questions you have, shoot them our way.
Awesome. And then do you have any personal social media that people could follow you on, or Instagram, Facebook, or anything like that?
Yeah, so on Instagram, it's under Mahi Marauder.
Nice name.
And then on Facebook, just Ryan Lambert.
That's awesome.
That's
Dude,
it.
there you guys have it. Go follow them. This place is crazy, the diversity of different places that you can go wet a line, different sports you can get into. Go check him out here at the Raleigh Expo. Go follow him on social media. We're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be doing our last interview of the day at the Raleigh Fishing Expo on a Saturday. Stay tuned.
Do you fish? No. You know, people who don't fish think that fishing is lazy or boring, but it is the complete opposite. There are 100 little decisions to be made, variables to be considered, and you're never quite sure what made the difference. Did I cast too high, too far to the left? Did I reel it in too slow or too fast? Is the lure too shiny or too dull? Do I stay here or should I go over there? And you know it's not luck, but you do not know by how much. Because I am never disappointed out here, because I don't expect anything, because anything is possible. I can be hopeful out here, even in failure. Because I know if I just go out there around that tree, it might be different. Something might be different. Something I do might make a difference.
You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Here are marvelous, welcoming. They're easy to talk to.
What about you?
It's great. This is the first time I've been down in Raleigh, North Carolina, and there are a lot of new booths, which is really fun. And so there's a lot more new people to meet. So it's great.
But you guys are really talkative when you're offside the camera there. It's interesting how this changes a little bit. So, guys, what we're going to be doing, Randy, no, I see you here, boss. I'm just going to be hanging with you for a little bit. I'm having them on camera. I'm going to be doing basically my post-game show right now before we just shut it off for meet and greets the rest of the day. There's been so many people that came by, and I feel kind of guilty that I'm trying to put in almost too much content and not enough hanging out with people as well. So we'll be mixing that up here a little bit. Carly, what is your first takeaway from today?
Did you say what's my biggest takeaway for today?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's hard to hear you because there's the fishing booth over there.
Linda. Mom.
Biggest takeaway. Linda's fine since we're on public television here, so to speak. I think it would be the biologists and
Yeah, that's cool. That's true.
the way they came about and what they're teaching, I think is fascinating. And even the biologists that you had on yesterday, and how reefs are making that. Reefs. I can't say that word.
Reefs.
Are, artificial reefs are created and stuff like that. I think they're very fascinating to speak with.
No, the reefs are really cool. Having the biologists on, as you called them, what did you call them, two bald men or something like that?
Two bald
Two bald biologists, which scared me to death at first because I thought like you're profiling people, which is absolutely interesting. Have you visited a bunch of the booths, or did I miss it? No. So Randy, what happened was the Wi-Fi here was
hit or miss.
Was hit or miss. It was bad. And so day one we tried to do it, and the internet would just not allow us to be able to go booth to booth. So we pivoted a lot, and what we decided to do is bring everyone to us to do as many interviews as possible. Next year we're going to hopefully bring our own Wi-Fi that could be a little bit more portable. We might experiment with maybe using like a hotspot, but that's a whole other thing we're going to have to try. So I do apologize for not being able to bring booth-to-booth coverage here. We are going to try that again at Richmond. Hopefully the internet's good there. The last few years, Richmond has been extremely good without a problem, honestly. Knock on wood.
I think we've just been lucky, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, ICAST, Richmond Fishing Expo, Augusta County. Even Augusta County wasn't bad, honestly, which is crazy. So this is our first time where we had issues going booth to booth. We'll try again, fear not. We're going to try again at Richmond. We're also going to be bringing you some boat content tomorrow as well, because there's a whole other building that we forgot to do with boats and kayaks and things like that. So we're going to try to bring that to you guys as well. Do you guys have any other closing thoughts before I let you go and get you away from the camera?
I think my favorite part this weekend was the candied apples, in case anyone was wondering. And
There is a family-owned business, 4 generations, that are supplying. They have candied apples, they have fudge, they have strudels. Fantastic booth.
I've spent a lot of time over there this weekend.
Yes.
I've had 3 apples. It's been very good.
The food has been very
We
good.
have not had lunch.
Yeah, as you can tell, they've been working their butts off giving me stuff because we had issues with trying to go into booth to booth today. They've been working around the clock, going and pulling people in from the different booths with their baits and stuff so we could show them off. If you missed it, all the stuff will be live here on my YouTube channel, on the Raleigh Fishing Expo Facebook page, a slew of other places. If you'd like to come out and see me, I'll be hanging here from now until close, just relaxing and hanging out with people that come by. Randy, I see Randy in the chat right now. Randy says, I'll try to meet you at Augusta. We're going to be at Augusta County. They do a great job holding us up, which is really fantastic of them. If you guys don't have anything else, I'll let you go.
We have
Sounds
a wonderful lineup for tomorrow.
Yep, definitely
wow.
tune in.
Who do you have? Actually, because I don't know the schedule either, because they just keep handing it to me. Who do we have
will
tomorrow?
Pull it up right now.
I'm pretty sure, yep. So tomorrow at 10 a.m., bright and early, we have Buka coming on, Buka Baits. 10:30, we have Wave Runner Guide by Brian White. 11:30, we have Chris Digavana with the...
You just butchered it, but that's okay. He's a colorful soul.
I'm sorry.
and he
We have
will-
Chris with Raleigh Saltwater Sport Fishing Club. And then you could have just let me keep talking and not said anything, and everybody would have just been like, she's a great reader. But no.
You don't have the right.
And now she went with a
Now-
racist Italian accent for no reason.
Next,
Okay.
next thing
She is from Appalachia. I do apologize.
12 p.m. we have Jeff Hodges with X at 9 Custom Baits. 12:30 we have Sean Hendricks with Kissel Craft Custom Rods. And then at 1 o'clock we have Hillsboro Sport Fishing Club.
There you have it, guys. That is the lowdown for tomorrow. And then again, I'll be posting later this week at the Richmond Fishing Expo. We're going to be doing a lot more meet and greets as well. I think we're going to have a meet and greet scheduled for about 2.5 to 3 hours each day, where I'm not filming content or doing anything and just hanging out. But again, we'll be promoting that later in the week. Girls, say goodbye, because they can still hear you on the mic. I could hear you, by the way. So I think that was perfect for them. They've never been on the camera before, so they're going to say
And
goodbye.
never will be again.
Yes.
I know,
Yeah.
everybody to see these shirts.
Oh, okay. You want to show the shirts? There you go.
Can you see it? You have to stand up.
Nope, they can see it.
Ta-da!
Advertising.
Yes, you have. And
Anybody's
then-
interested in shirts, hit us up. Thanks, bye.
All right, goodbye, guys. All right. Now, it's just me. We're going to be getting through some of your chats here. Now I get to be intimate with the audience for a little bit. How's everybody doing today? How's the audio sounding, Randy? Brandon says the audio sounds... Brandon says the audio is really good. Perfect. Mr. Jones, how are you guys doing? Eddie, how are you doing in the chat right now? Williams, welcome back, bud. CM Stone, how you doing? Good to see you as well. Randy, good to see you too, buddy. That's looking good. No, today was a lot of fun. I mean, there's a lot of really cool booths down here. Going from saltwater, crappie, freshwater, largemouth is insane. Hanging out with Bass Geek, having Bass Geek here was a lot of fun. You guys got to come on down to this Raleigh show. It is massive. I mean, they have two separate buildings for your boats, your kayaks, things like that. And then you have the rest of it here with all the cool vendors. America, we got people selling American flags. We have everything under the sun. Food, great people. Come on out on a nasty day like this. What are people looking forward to most with the season? Honestly, what is everyone looking forward to right now? I mean, the weather was absolutely, we'll just say it was shit. It was not really nice outside at all today. The first time I think this area of the country's ever experienced like snow, if I'm not mistaken, which was crazy. And with this, how is this going to affect fishing going forward? Are we going to be seeing potentially a faster pre-spawn, a very hard to find season for all of them? I mean, potentially, I think that's what's going to happen. I think what you're going to see is the pre-spawn is going to have a defined period, the spawn is going to have a defined period. And when you talk about the pre-spawn,
I mean, you really can take that and bring it to 3. I think you have the early pre-spawn, the main part of the pre-spawn, and then post pre-spawn. But I think the post pre-spawn kind of blends into the spawnish time period. I remember last year at Smith Mountain Lake, I think I was talking to Billy Coles and Mr. Streichel, that we talked about how the spawn was kind of weird. It just kind of like blended into the era of the spawn. There wasn't a hard set. They just ran to the beds for a couple of days, which was really, really interesting to me that was the case. But I think it's because you had such a warm winter. And now that winter is here and is completely kicking us in the teeth, it'll be interesting to see how this affects the fishing in our area going forward. Especially the grass on the Potomac River, the Upper Bay, the James River, places like that. How's it going to affect that? How's it going to affect the bait fish? We're seeing our first real shad die-offs. We got Randy in the chat again. I think pre-spawn be a bit earlier due to the real cold weather and cold temperatures. Randy, I think I 100% agree with you. When do you think Philpott is going to be going through its pre-spawn and its spawn this year, Randy? And yeah, I can't wait to see you at Augusta County as well. And then I really just say thank you guys for like putting up with all the stuff. Like again, like going to a new place, beta testing, all the internet and stuff. I think we were able to bring you a bunch of really good content, get you guys some really good interviews. Again, I apologize we weren't able to do the walk around. Everyone loves just to be the POV of what these places are like. But when lemonade falls, you make lemonade or beer or whatever you make with that stuff that you do. Randy says second week of April is when he thinks Philpott's going to be kind of kicking off. And Randy, I also want to say like huge shout out to you. You and about 200 other people really voiced how important Philpott was to the area. And I was able to like really rank it up a little bit higher in the tier list. And now that I've been down here, I know that there's so many more lakes to pick from to actually start talking about some bodies of water in this Raleigh area, this Piedmont area. And how weird it is that for the Piedmont division, that it includes like Bugs Island. Like I just don't feel like you should have technically Bugs Island in the Piedmont division when you have so many other lakes like the High Rock, like Hyco, like even Lake Norman, places like that you could go to. It's insane. Like there's so many lakes around here that maybe the BFL should dabble in going to that they won't do, which is a shame really. There are so many cool bodies of water here that could be in somebody's either vacation plans or potentially a tournament schedule that you just don't see. And that is really, really a shame. And I think it's really because of the organization saying like, hey, for whatever reason, these are only the 6 lakes that we are allowed to go to indefinitely. Crappie fishing, looking around, that there's crappie fishing down here is insane with a lot of lakes like Jordan, Harris. Like it's really crazy to see the culture down here when it comes to crappie fishing. And look at even the saltwater thing. I mean, the red fishing and speck fishing down here is absolutely insane. So, again, when are we starting tomorrow, Carly? 10 a.m.? 10 a.m. tomorrow? Yeah. Buka. All right, guys. So what we're doing is tomorrow we are starting at 10 a.m. with Buka glide baits. I'm going to try to have these wonderful people that you saw off camera not book the schedule as much, so in case there's some variance, like Buka wants to go a little bit longer or he wants to switch it up so it's not too packed. Because if there's about 800 booths here, let's just say, in theory I don't think I could cover every single booth. Yeah. I don't. Whoever's listening right now, do the math for me. Could I actually cover every booth here in a feasible amount of time? Let's say if I gave 20 to 30 minutes to each vendor, is it possible to get through them all with me staying awake and alive? I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think that would be even possible at all. But I could be wrong there. But we gave you a bunch of coverage. Let me know in the comment section below what would you like to see me cover next going on in the future. I definitely want to start covering more in this North Carolina region, this weird border region of Virginia, where so many people just like bounce down and fish in here from the Virginia DMV area. Randy says, yeah, thanks for bringing us all the info. Great job. Randy, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And dude, thank you so much for tuning in as much as you do, Randy. It really means a lot. And then I got Phil in the chat too. Another Phil. Thanks again for doing it. Thank you guys. I really appreciate that as well. I'm gonna get through here on Instagram too. Get some of these comments done. We got Clever Clever BD joined. He said, like, how was it down there? It was a lot of fun. McDaniel says, how was it? Is good. Wrong McDaniel. The other one there asks how it was. It was a lot of fun. I think we've gotten a ton of views because, again, we are streaming on like 4 different Facebook groups, Instagram, YouTube, all over the place. It's been insane. And I mean, internet, it is what it is. Like, unless you're going to spend, $1 billion on your own Wi-Fi, there's not much that you can do about that. But I think I learned a lot about how to do this going forward and adjusting things always to make it better. And then also just all the people that came by to say hi. That was I'm always blown away by going to a new place and how many people come by and say, oh, how are you doing? This is awesome. Like that's always cool and humbling. It really is. But again, guys, so what we're going to be doing is tomorrow, 10 a.m. Buka will be here. Hopefully, we'll be doing, I'll try to get that live stream up tomorrow morning, hopefully. Maybe tonight I'll get that thing all dialed in for you guys so that you can see it. And Randy's like, well, the picture is great now. Randy, okay, this is our thing. I think it's this. When nobody's in the building, I think the internet is great. Because if you can tell, I'm going to add another camera here. So if you can tell, there's nobody here right now. It's a little bit slower. So if you want to get a great deal, come on in right now. But right now, it's like the internet's better. It's clean and stuff. And I think it's because nobody's here. And in theory, I honestly, Carly, that's probably something good to know next time. Is maybe it's like when it's dead, when it's slow, is when we go out and walk around. Well, yeah, I mean, a poor choice of words, but yeah, when it's slower, this is the time. Yeah, I think that's when we got to go booth to booth. And in theory, guys, we could probably do that tomorrow if you want, or if you want, we can do it at the end. But let me know in the comment section if that's something that you want to do. Otherwise, at Richmond, that's something we'll definitely do a better job of, is when it starts slowing down, that's when we'll actually get back out here and do it. What? Oh, okay, cool. So yeah, I think that's what we'll do now. But yeah, Randy, it's working now. It's working clean now. Huge shout out to Verizon for letting me use a hotspot too. That really saved us there when it was getting really choppy. But I'm glad that the audio went through, which is important. The audio is what was good, so people could hear everything, which is what's important there. So as always, guys. Again, look for the live stream tomorrow at 10 a.m. is when we're going to be going down with our next shindig as well. Like and subscribe to the channel, really helps out. If you want to, go check us out on Patreon. Patreon is the only way that this thing is possible, is because of you guys helping support the show. Let me know, email me, get a hold of me if there's something that you'd like me to see covering next, and we'll see you tomorrow morning here live at the Raleigh Bass and Saltwater Extravaganza. Bye.
You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your hosts, Thomas Ahrens and Jared Mounts. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.